There are things that never appear on the evening news. Not because they didn't happen, but because some events lie beyond the boundaries of what humanity dares to believe is real. In a remote land in northern Siberia, where the ground remains frozen year-round and the nights last longer than the days, a group of scientists vanished during the winter of 1987. They had gone there to study geology, or at least, that was what the official documents claimed. But among the leaked files that surfaced later, not a single line mentioned mineral samples. Instead, they spoke of a signal, one that had been received from the ionosphere, at a frequency unlike anything humanity had ever recorded. The signal originated from a very specific location, beneath the ground, in a region completely devoid of life. The expedition team consisted of 12 members. 6 vanished without a trace. 2 returned in a state of madness, unable to remember who they were, and the remaining 4. Their identities were never disclosed. Rumors began to spread that the Soviet government had constructed a secret facility around the area, known as Sector M19. But no official maps ever referenced it. Sector M19 did not exist, at least, not on paper. 30 years later, an independent German journalist named Henrik Weber began investigating the incident. He wasn't someone who believed in the paranormal, it started as just another routine report. But the deeper he dug, the more he realized something wasn't right. Some medical records of the survivors, preserved in the archives of the former East German healthcare system, had been digitized, and within them were details that chilled Henrik to the bone. The doctors described a condition never seen before. Not simple paranoia, but a precise obsession with eyes without pupils, a blue light from beneath the earth, and most disturbingly, a sound echoing from a place without air. Henrik had interviewed survivors of war, famine, and industrial disasters, but none unnerved him like a man named Kirill Sidorov, one of the 4 who returned from Sector M19. Sidorov couldn't recall exactly what had happened. But when Henrik played him an old audio recording, reconstructed from the radio data the expedition team had transmitted before disappearing, Sidorov began to tremble and scream, "It's still there. You don't understand. It never left." In the recording, a series of sounds could be heard, resembling electromagnetic waves. But when Henrik processed the signal through acoustic analysis software, he discovered they formed a consistent structure, like an encrypted language. A rhythmic pattern, 5 tones, a pause, 5 tones, repeated again and again. Henrik sent the signal to a former NATO codebreaker. The reply came that same night, faster than expected. A short, chilling email, "Send nothing more. Delete all copies. We're watching you." That's when Henrik realized he had stumbled into something far beyond his control. Over the next 2 months, he was followed, his devices lost signal, and his email was hacked 3 times. He decided to leave Berlin, taking the original sound file with him and flying to Iceland, where he hoped it would be quiet enough to continue his work. In Iceland, he met a man who called himself only Jackal. He had once been a radio engineer for the US military, stationed in Greenland. When Henrik played the recording for him, the man was silent for a long time before finally saying, "I've heard this before. But not in Siberia. In Antarctica." Jackal's words struck Henrik like a shockwave. The remote ice fields of Antarctica had always been a blank spot on Henrik's mental map, a place reserved for weather stations, penguins, and endless white voids. But Jackal wasn't speaking metaphorically. "I was stationed at Bird Station in 1972, he said, voice low, gravelly. "One night, we picked up a VLF signal, incredibly faint, but clearly structured. It was the same 5-beat pattern. We traced it, not to the sky, not to any orbiting satellite, but beneath the ice. More than 2 miles down. I filed a report. It disappeared. A week later, 2 men in gray suits came and shut everything down." Henrik leaned forward, heart pounding. "What did they say it was?" "They didn't say anything. Just took the tapes." But a month later, the team lead, Lieutenant Simmons, vanished during a routine drill. 1 second he was marking coordinates, next, he was gone. No footsteps. No trace. Just static on every radio channel for exactly 5 minutes. Then silence. Henrik took out his recorder and asked Jokel for a copy of his old report. The old man hesitated. "You're poking something that doesn't like being disturbed. But you remind me of someone who used to believe truth mattered." That night, Henrik stayed in a small wooden cabin at the foot of the Snæfellsjökull glacier. The wind howled like a living thing outside. As he reviewed the signal again, playing it slowly, he noticed something new. The frequency shifted ever so slightly every 37 seconds. He opened spectral analysis software and overlaid the waveform. There was a pattern, not just rhythm, but symmetry, fractal echoes of itself folding into strange geometric sequences. He didn't sleep. By morning, his computer had flagged an anomaly. Hidden within the noise floor of the signal, something not immediately audible, like a carrier wave, encoded a secondary message. Not random data. But what looked like. Coordinates: latitude, 77 degrees 31 minutes. Longitude, 126 degrees 28 minutes, Henrik cross-referenced the location. It wasn't in Siberia. It wasn't even in Antarctica, it was in the South Pacific Ocean. Right in the heart of the so-called Pacific Pole of inaccessibility, Point Nemo. The furthest place on Earth from any landmass. A dead zone, except it wasn't dead. NASA had once reported that they intentionally crashed old satellites into the ocean at Point Nemo. But now Henrik wondered if there was another reason that area was kept so quiet. He booked a flight to Santiago. From there, he found a French deep-sea researcher, Dr. Elise Marchand, who was scheduled to launch a small submersible expedition toward the South Pacific anomaly for unrelated tectonic research. She didn't believe his story at first. But when Henrik played her the signal, her expression changed. "My team recorded something like this 3 months ago," she said. "We thought it was a fault in the equipment. But if it's the same..." She agreed to let Henrik come aboard. 10 days later, aboard the research vessel Alveol, drifting hundreds of miles from any land, the submersible Noctiluca descended into the abyss. The sun vanished from the portholes after 5 minutes. Below them stretched endless dark. At 6,000 meters, strange lights flickered in the depths, bioluminescent creatures twisting and vanishing like mirages. But then came the silence. The ocean, always humming, suddenly felt wrong. The sensors began acting erratically. And then the signal returned, only stronger. Henrik could feel it now, not just hear it. It made his bones vibrate. His teeth ache. The pilot, nervous, tried to stabilize the craft as strange magnetic readings began to spike, and then, the lights, not biological, perfect white, arranged in a circle far beneath them, the seafloor opened like a wound, a structure, black, geometric, far too precise to be natural, rose up silently. It had no seams, no doors. Just surfaces that shimmered like liquid metal, but refused to reflect. The signal became a scream. The Noctiluca lost all power. Henrik remembered little after that. He awoke on the surface, back aboard the Alveol, with no memory of how they surfaced. Elise was missing. So was the pilot. No one else believed him. The footage was corrupted. The pressure logs made no sense. They suggested the submersible had gone down over 13,000 meters. Impossible. Henrik returned to Europe. He tried to publish his findings. No one listened. Then came the messages. At first, emails. Then texts. Then nothing digital, just voices on the phone lines, whispering in languages he did not know. One night, a package arrived. No return address. Inside, a flash drive, and a note, "You were never meant to remember." On the flash drive, a video file, grainy, time-stamped during the mission. It showed Noctiluca descending into blackness. Until something massive moved outside the viewport. Not a ship. Not a creature, something in between, a shape that defied geometry. Ever shifting, a presence that had been watching, and then a final frame, Elise, standing in a corridor of impossible architecture. Behind her, an eye, towering, unblinking, not human, the feed cut out. Henrik vanished 1 month later. His apartment was found abandoned, door ajar. Laptop shattered. No fingerprints, the only thing left on his wall, a crude drawing. A circle. 5 lines. Then another circle. People said he went mad, but some say the signal still pulses. Hidden in the static of deep-sea transmitters. Buried in the background radiation. Calling to something older than mankind. Something that was here long before us, waiting. And listening. The apartment remained sealed for months. No relatives came forward. No official investigation was opened. Just another name lost in the shadows of bureaucracy. But what the authorities didn't know, or perhaps didn't want to admit, was that someone else had been watching Henrik even before he vanished. A man known only by the pseudonym Argus had been tracking anomalous signals across the globe for over 20 years. He had built an underground network of amateur researchers, ex-military techs, and rogue astrophysicists, people who had seen too much and trusted no one. Henrik's name had been flagged in their system after his attempt to decrypt the second layer of the Pacific signal. Argus had intercepted Henrik's corrupted footage and began to rebuild the missing frames using quantum interpolation. What emerged chilled him. In one recovered sequence, there were glyphs, symbols on the walls of the impossible structure under the ocean. They weren't human. They weren't even symmetrical in ways that organic intelligence would prefer. But what terrified Argus was the fact that the pattern resembled fragments he had seen before, in 1996, during a military satellite scan over the Taklamakan Desert. And again, deep inside the Amazon, where an uncontacted tribe was found worshipping metallic, sky gods, that whispered through stone, the same geometric language. The same frequency modulation buried inside natural sounds, wind, water, even birdsong. As Argus dug deeper, he found that these signals, these echoes, formed a triangulation. One point in the Arctic Circle. One beneath the Pacific. And the third, in northern Algeria, near the Ahagar Mountains, where ancient cave paintings depicted tall beings with enormous black eyes and long, slender fingers pointing to the stars. Argus decided to go there himself. He entered Algeria under a fake name, posing as a geologist. But when he reached the edges of the Ahagar, he met a Tuareg elder named Idris who seemed to be expecting him. "You follow the whispers," Idris said, not asking but declaring. "They want you to come." Argus hesitated. "Who?" But the old man just turned and began walking toward the desert hills. Argus followed. They traveled for 2 days, into an area unmarked on any map, where the sands shifted like a living thing, and compasses spun wildly. Finally, Idris pointed toward a narrow crevice between 2 black stone cliffs. Inside, the air grew colder, drier. The walls were lined with petroglyphs, some clearly prehistoric. Others impossibly modern. "There is no time here," Idris whispered. "This place exists between." As they reached the chamber at the end, Argus saw it, a disk of metal, embedded in the rock, humming softly. No seams. No bolts. Just a circular surface, pulsating faintly with the same 5-beat rhythm. He raised his portable spectrometer. The readings were impossible. The material absorbed 100% of light, heat, and even electromagnetic interference. It shouldn't exist, and then, the disk opened, no hinges. No sound, just space. Behind it, a void. Argus stepped forward, and the world changed. He wasn't in the cave anymore. He wasn't anywhere. Just floating, his body intact, his senses overwhelmed. Before him stood a form, not solid, not entirely visible, but intelligent. He couldn't tell if it was technology, or biology, or something beyond. The being did not speak. It communicated through compression of sensation, wave packets of understanding. And in an instant, Argus saw, the Earth was seeded, not once, but many times, over millions of years. Intelligence had been cultivated, observed, and harvested. Civilizations risen and allowed to fall. Mankind was not the first. Nor the last. The beings, the watchers, existed in layers of reality that bled through only its specific resonances. The signals were not messages. They were keys to memory, to knowledge buried not just in the earth, but in human DNA. Argus collapsed on the desert floor. Idris stood over him, silent. "You have seen," the old man said. When Argus awoke 2 days later, the disc was gone. Buried. Or never there at all. He left Algeria, changed. No longer searching for answers, but for proof. Proof that others had seen. That Henrik wasn't alone. That humanity's myths were echoes of forgotten encounters. Meanwhile, across the world, strange anomalies began to occur. In Japan, a child drew a perfect map of the Pacific seafloor, accurate to the centimeter, having never seen a globe. In Chile, a meteorological station recorded radio emissions coming from deep inside the Andes, using exact modulations of the 5-beat signal. In Norway, an experimental quantum computer crashed while simulating the background radiation of the universe. Printing the words, "We are remembering before shutting down," governments denied everything, but private satellite imagery showed something rising in the South Pacific again, something massive. Silent. Geometric, the ocean around it had become still, unnaturally calm. Fish and whales were avoiding it. The magnetic field warped for miles in every direction. Then came the dreams. People across continents reported the same vision, a black monolith, pulsing with light. A door, slowly opening. And a voice, not in sound, but in thought, saying, "You were never alone. You were never in control." Those who heard it began drawing. Writing. Building strange devices in their garages. Speaking in languages they didn't know. Some were institutionalized. Others vanished. And in every case, their blood work showed a strange anomaly, a frequency buried in their cells, resonating at 47.5 Hz, exactly the same frequency buried in Henrik's original signal. Argus finally decoded the third layer. It was a countdown, and it had already started. The countdown accelerated. Argus didn't sleep. He moved between safe houses in Croatia, the Azores, and eventually a hidden research bunker beneath Prague, where a group of disavowed scientists and outcast physicists had assembled, connected only by one thread. They had all seen something. One of them, Dr. Kyra Sokolov, had built a rudimentary interface to process the harmonics of the alien signal. It wasn't a language in the human sense. It was a layered architecture of thought, what she called conceptual scaffolding. Instead of communicating ideas directly, the signal induced mental constructs that built upon themselves. The more one listened, the more one remembered. And not just personal memories, memories of cities that never existed. Of stars in skies we've never seen. Of wars that spanned entire nebulae. Of ancient civilizations wiped clean and reset, again and again, like a garden being trimmed by invisible hands. "The signal doesn't teach," Kyra whispered one night, staring at the waveform oscillating on her screen. "It unlocks. It was never meant to explain. It's awakening something already inside us." Argus asked her what she meant. She turned to him, eyes wide, her voice barely a whisper. "We are not native to this world. Not entirely." On the 47th day of the countdown, a seismic anomaly was detected near Point Nemo. Unlike a quake, it originated in 3 distinct pulses, with energy signatures matching nothing in the known geological record. Satellites picked up momentary distortions in the ocean's surface, triangular, too precise to be natural. Within 24 hours, every marine research buoy within 1,000 kilometers went silent. The watchers had moved, not from space, but from below. All this time, they had not merely observed from distant galaxies. They had nested, rooted themselves into the architecture of the planet. Hidden under ocean trenches, volcanic cores, polar caps. They weren't visitors. They were caretakers, or jailers. Kyra made one final breakthrough before she disappeared. The countdown wasn't just a clock. It was a trigger for synchronization. Every ancient monument, Stonehenge, Göbekli Tepe, the pyramids, the Nazca lines, the Yonaguni ruins, aligned not only astronomically, but resonated to the same harmonic profile when the signal played through the correct medium, an oscillating quartz substrate, buried beneath each site. She activated all 7 known resonance points simultaneously using portable emitters, powered by the waveform of the deep-sea structure. The result, a global tremor of consciousness, for 47 minutes. Millions across the world experienced what was later called the vision pulse. A single, shared hallucination of a being stepping through a fold in space, touching each person with a finger of light, and whispering, "We are the seed and the harvest. And the time is now." Then silence, governments panicked. Internet blackouts swept Asia and Europe. GPS systems misaligned by several kilometers overnight. In Arizona, a dry lake bed cracked open and revealed a black sphere, 300 meters wide, embedded in solid rock, composed of no known element. The world teetered on the edge. Argus received a final message from Kyra before her lab was raided. It was not a recording. Not text, it was a sound, a 7-second harmonic burst. He played it, he screamed, the sound was not painful. It was perfect. Too perfect. It resonated inside his skull like a tuning fork made for the soul. He collapsed. And when he woke up, he remembered his birth, not from his mother, from a shell, in a different form. In a different body. In a different world, he had lived before, and not as a human. The Watchers weren't aliens in the way humans defined them. They were fragments of a consciousness so vast, so ancient, it no longer had form. They existed across dimensions, folding into our reality like a hand pressing into water. What we saw as UFOs, disks, lights, creatures, were just sensory bleed-throughs. Like shadows flickering on the walls of Plato's cave. The countdown ended not with a bang, but a blink. All over the world, the lights dimmed, not electrical. But conscious, people reported losing time. Hours. Some for days. Entire towns fell silent. When recontacted, the residents spoke in slow, strange tones. All of them drawing spirals. Circles. 5 lines. Over and over, in the Mariana Trench, a U.S. deep-sea drone transmitted one final image before it was lost, a city. Angular. Towering. Glowing from within. With no doors. Just windows that weren't windows, openings into places that weren't part of Earth. Then came the ships, not fleets. Not invaders, one ship. Massive. Not made of metal, but of something living. Stretching kilometers wide, gliding silently above the clouds, visible only through infrared. It hovered over the Amazon for 3 hours. Then vanished. After that, dreams changed. They were no longer messages, they were memories, of who we were before Earth, of our original form. Of our exile, because that's what Earth was, a vault. A prison for minds too dangerous to be allowed among the stars until we had forgotten what we were. The Watchers weren't our creators, they were our wardens, and now. The key had been turned. Argus stopped running. He returned to the site where Henrik had last been seen, in Iceland. The glacier had melted. The cave opened wider. And inside, he found something waiting for him, not a ship, not a being, a chair, crafted of material that shimmered with memory. He Saturday, and everything returned. His past lives. His crimes. His rebellion. He was not Argus, he had never been human, he had been one of the first, and now, the Watchers had come to bring him back, but not to imprison, to judge, and across the world, others remembered too, in cities and deserts, forests and oceans, they emerged, those who had felt the signal. They gathered without words, without plans. Drawn by something ancient and inexorable, some ascended, some vanished, and some were taken, but none remained unchanged. The earth had shifted, it still spun. Still turned beneath the sun, but no longer alone. The stars were watching again, and this time, they remembered, the sky above Reykjavik shimmered with a strange aurora. Though there were no solar storms. People stood outside in silence, gazing upward, not in awe, but in understanding. They didn't know why they were watching, only that something had begun. Something old. Something promised. Argus was no longer Argus. The chair in the ice cave had unlocked the final layer, not of the signal, but of himself. He now saw across lifetimes, like flipping pages in a book. Each incarnation, each exile, was part of a greater sentence. The crime, treason against the architects. The punishment, amnesia, rebirth, Earth. Now the sentence was complete. Around the world, the chosen few were awakening, those who had heard the 5-beat call, those whose DNA still carried the buried keys. They were not all scientists or visionaries. Some were children. Some were prisoners. Some were lost souls. But they all shared the same buried code. And now the code had been activated. From the depths of the ocean, the submerged structure, once thought a myth, rose, no longer hiding in trenches. It emerged in silence, surrounded by whirlpools and floating wreckage. A monolith city, angular and impossible, floating above the sea like a memory made solid. Its walls pulsed with the rhythm of the signal. Not as a message. As a heartbeat, the watchers did not speak. They had never needed to, their judgment was not wrathful. It was precise. One final signal was released, global. Unstoppable, clean. It wasn't destructive, it was clarity. Every human on Earth felt it. A moment of perfect silence in the mind. Then a vision, stars folding into each other, galaxies blooming in impossible colors. Time unraveling like silk. And a voice, not alien, not human, but something buried deep within the core of every living cell. You are not the first world. You are not the last breath. You are the echo of something older than time. You were cast down, but now you rise. Welcome back. Then it was over. The ship in the Amazon vanished. The city in the ocean sank once more beneath the waves. But those who had changed remained changed. They formed no religion, no movement. No war, they simply knew. And they waited, for what? For the return. For the rejoining. Earth, for all its pain and beauty, was no longer a prison, it had become a chrysalis, and the stars, once distant and cold, now watched not as jailers, but as parents welcoming a long-lost child. Somewhere, far beyond the heliosphere, a ripple passed through the void, not a signal, not a sound, a memory, carried not by light, but by gravity itself, and in the silence between stars, something immense. Opened its eyes, it smiled, because Earth had remembered. And the cosmos was no longer alone.